China is a big topic on YouTube. Some videos tell us it's on the brink of some crippling disaster, while others tell us it's on the path to economic dominance as a superpower. What's really happening? Are the problems just growing pains, or signs of a Chinese downfall? Well, as Yogi Berra said, it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. So I'll start by showing you some parallels between China's problems and the growing pains that the United States had in earlier parts of history. Then I'll describe some of China's advantages. First, complain about China. It may be headed for economic collapse. Well, okay, we had an economic collapse in the Great Depression less than 100 years ago, and we came roaring back with a post-war boom. Second complaint. Xi Jinping fires people, purges them, including high-ranking military officers, for political reasons. Well, remember the McCarthy era of the 1950s, when hundreds of people were imprisoned and thousands lost their job for their suspected political beliefs or their association with communism. Some of them were even executed. In particular, the nuclear scientist Julius Rosenberg and his wife, Ethel, were executed for their association with the Soviets. And in 1970, 4 students were killed and 9 others wounded for their protests against the Vietnam War at Kent State. Next complaint. The Chinese government may be exaggerating its numbers for its population and its GDP. One video tells us specifically that China may be reporting its GDP to be 1.3 times as high as it actually is, and its population to be twice what it really is. Now, this is a strange thing to complain about, because if they're exaggerating the population more than the GDP, then that means the GDP per capita is lower, and they look more backwards and poor than they really are. Who would want to fudge the data to make themselves look worse? Well, supposedly, the local governments in China exaggerate their population for political advantage. Okay, the United States has also manipulated population numbers for political advantage. In our original Constitution, for purposes of representation in Congress, the slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person. Now, we ended up fighting a civil war over this kind of thing. Next complaint. The Chinese middle class is disappearing. Okay, our own middle class is shrinking right now. Next up, China has a corrupt Ponzi scheme in the housing market. In the United States, Bernie Madoff did the same thing in the stock market. We also survived a housing finance crisis with subprime mortgages in 2008. Americans lived through a lot of growing pains on their way to becoming a superpower. China may be able to do exactly the same. So now let's look at China's advantages. The first is population. The official number is 1.4 billion, and even if it's half that much, they're still way ahead of us. They have a very long and rich cultural history. China was the world's richest country for 500 years, as reported by Adam Smith in 1776. It then lagged behind for a few hundred years, but it's catching up again. Then there's the brain gain. In the past, we used to talk about brain drains. That's where people, well-educated people from the low-income countries, move to higher-income countries to get better job opportunities. Now the job opportunities are looking pretty better in China. And some of the scientists and engineers in the United States, if they're Chinese-born, they don't feel as welcome as they used to be. The Chinese intellectuals from all over the world are returning home with technical knowledge from everywhere. Then we have rare earth production. These minerals are essential for almost everything in our electronics world. We import at least 80% of the rare earths we need, and most of that supply comes from China. Author David Abraham explained why each rare earth mined requires development of its own refining process, and it takes about 15 years to get production started. Also, they have toxic byproducts that are environmentally unfriendly, to say the least. American companies are constrained by quarterly profit reports and environmental regulations. The Chinese government is much more willing to think long term and to accept some environmental degradation for the mining areas. Theoretically, we can catch up to China in rare earth production, but it will take a lot of time and money. For the moment, we need their materials as much as they need our technology. According to the National Association of Manufacturers, China is winning the electricity race, building new power capacity faster than anybody else. They use all forms of electricity generation, and they're the world leaders in renewable energy production. For trade, China is always the dominant nation for building container ships and the containers they carry. Their Belt and Road Initiative includes building megaports around the world. These are the most obvious advantages. I get the picture that China is moving up the technology scale step by step, learning how to make everything in the modern world and making it bigger. There are a lot of steps to becoming an economic superpower, and China is clearly stumbling on some of them, just as we did. So what will China's future be? I don't know, but I think it would be a great idea to think in terms of being a good neighbor.